Hello, everyone, and welcome to All New Metrics for New Car Success. This automotive news power training webinar is brought to you by vAuto. We're delighted you're with us today for this presentation. I'm Karen O'Rourke, a news editor at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speaker today, a few navigation tips. First, we encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit submit. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Also, to enlarge the slides, just grab the frame with your mouse and pull it larger. And to download the slides, click on the handouts icon at the bottom of your console. Today's speaker is Brian Finkelmeyer. Brian is Senior Director of Conquest at vAuto. Prior to joining the company, Brian spent more than 17 years in a variety of sales and marketing leadership roles at Nissan North America. Brian is a regular contributor to various industry publications and a frequent presenter at industry events. And now, Brian, I'll turn things over to you to get us started.
Great. Thanks, Karen, and good afternoon, everybody. Before we get into the presentation, I wanted to say that I'm sure many of you watched the Super Bowl on Sunday night and Bill Belichick going for sort of a record number of championships. And there was a documentary on actually ESPN about Bill Belichick and Bill Parcells. And what I thought was really fascinating about Belichick and his story was just that they attribute much of his success to really two key things, which is his incredible attention to detail and his ability to make adaptations to the game plan as the game is going on. I think, you look at last year's Super Bowl against the Falcons where the Patriots were down by quite a bit. They made a number of changes to their tactics in the second half and walked away with another ring. So I think there's a lot of things that we can learn from looking at the way Belichick's handling the Patriots and the success that they've had there and how we can think about some of that as we manage our new car operations. And when we get started here, I think one of the big things we have to look at as we're thinking about our new car business is that there's a lot of headwinds that we're up against. And I would argue that we're almost at a state of emergency when it comes to new car profitability. And when I looked at the NADA net profit per new vehicle sold data, and when you trend this from 2014 to 2017, you see a pretty alarming trend there. In 2014, the average new car dealer in America was losing about $10 a car. You fast forward to last year, and that number increases by 40x to $406 a car in lost profit. And so it sort of begs the question, how is this sustainable for dealers to keep operating in this fashion? Some of the other headwinds that we're facing is rising advertising costs. We've seen dealers increase their ad expense per car now is almost $650 a car, which is quite a bit more than what we're making. And then when you look at the rent expense, as many dealers are investing in new facilities, the average rent expense is also climbing. And then the last one that I want to point out is we've seen a decrease in the amount of income that we're able to book from our floor plan credits. So the last couple of years, we've seen inventories have rised and interest rates increased 3 times last year, and the net result of that was dealers' income per car has dropped from 128 to 57. So I think there's a lot of things we need to be aware of as we look forward here to 2018 and how we're managing our business to create a sustainable profitability as we move forward. One last point I want to raise is Mike Jackson, the CEO of AutoNation, last year was quoted in Automotive News, is saying that the retailers have really changed the game, and he said that they're basically saying to the dealers, you can no longer make money selling new cars, and I think we're seeing that loud and clear with that negative $406 per car average. And when we took a deeper look at this, we have some information that showed that just this rising reliance upon bonus and below-the-line money from the manufacturers. So in 2017, the average dealer reported about 75% of their new vehicle department gross was in the form of stair-step or volume bonus money from their auto manufacturers. And so there's just a number of pressures that dealers are up against with today's online shopper. The inventory situation has been climbing, the pressure that OEMs are placing on dealers to hit more and more aggressive sales targets. I think many of those things are driving this net profit challenge that we're facing. One last thing, not to sort of pile on the bad news, but one last thing that I think many of us are aware of is the fact that the new car market has more or less plateaued. We had a couple of years at about 17.6 million. 2017 came in at about 17.1 million. And I think most of the forecasts that I've seen for the upcoming year are calling for about a 16.7 million SAR. This particular analysis that was done by Morgan Stanley and just last year is calling for continued retraction down more to historical levels that we've seen where the new car business in America runs at about 15 million, where a year ago they had sort of forecast something that was kind of trending the other way, going up towards 18, 19 million. So I think that's just one other thing to keep our eye on, is that we're likely going to be operating in a market with even less sales. In fact, I just read a quote just the other day from Penske where they said, you know, we're looking at our dealerships, and if we can't be we're not making money here in the best of times, we need to think about making changes and maybe offloading some of those locations that are not profitable. So I think we really need to look at the landscape here in 2018 and think about how we can manage our business differently moving forward. We believe at vAuto that, you know, the old adage of just sell more to make more, that sort of equation is broken, and we really think it's a critical time for new car operators to rethink their new car equation. You know, the old metrics that have always been around for managing our new car business more or less revolved around what's my overall sales volume, or what's my state rank in terms of total units sold. Dealers obviously and factory representatives are constantly measuring their market share performance. Am I gaining or losing share relative to my competition in the market? And then we've always historically looked at new car gross, and last but not least, you know, customer satisfaction. I think that those metrics are still relevant, but I believe that perhaps we should start looking at our business with a more granular lens. And what I want to talk about today is understanding some of the key metrics that will help us be successful in this extraordinarily competitive environment that we're playing in. And so the first metric I'm going to talk about is being more granular of understanding the unique situation on each of the pieces of inventory in your new car lot. We'll talk a little bit about what we call the price to market rank and having a more clarity around your relative position in the market in terms of pricing. I want to talk a little bit about VDP engagement and looking at more than just the number of VDPs I'm getting on my listings, but how much engagement are my customers having with my VDPs. And then lastly, you know, we believe that perhaps the single most important metric in new cars today that is not being closely monitored is how quickly am I turning my new car inventory. So we'll start off with percentage of fast-moving inventory, and I think one important lesson about the new car business is that the 80-20 rule definitely holds true, which is to say that about 20% of the combinations on your lot within a particular model line make up about 80% of the sales. And so it's really important as a dealer that we have that clear visibility as to what that 20% is of that fast-turning combinations that customers are looking for, because vehicles and combinations in that 80% typically are going to represent much of your aging problem, or vehicles that you're going to have to discount with more extreme discounts. One great stat that we uncovered last year was that, you know, we wanted to do an analysis just to see, like, what does market day supply, what impact does that have on your ability to turn inventory? And what we found was that vehicles with a 30 market day supply actually turn 4 times faster than a vehicle with a 60 market day supply. And so this really calls into question, as we manage our new car inventories, which I realize that many stores can be 300, 400, 500 cars. it takes time and some energy to sort of have that more granular understanding of which of my cars are the fast-turning versions and which ones are slower. One of the big challenges that we face in being able to order the right inventory is that our factory partners often make our job very difficult with the vast amount of complexity that's involved with ordering new cars today. And in this particular example of the Infiniti Q50, there were 2,900 different combinations of that car in inventory across America. And of that 2,900, about 65% of them, 1,850, had 1 or 0 sales in 90 days, which is to say, you know, you've got about a 65% chance of ordering the wrong car if you just were kind of throwing darts at the board. So it really does, this factory monthly ordering requires, I think, quite a bit more attention than what the average dealer is doing. In fact, we did a survey not too long ago where the average dealer reported they spend 2 or less hours a month analyzing their inventory in terms of what vehicles they should stock. I think the activity, when you consider the amount of dollars that are tied up in the average new car inventory, certainly begs the question of why we're not spending more than 2 hours analyzing the situation. Another example I want to share is one from the Nissan, which is what percentage of the Rogues, and looking at Nissan Rogue a little bit more closely. And what we saw here was across 3 different Rogues, a red, a gray, and a black. I think on the surface, most people would think that, you know, I'd see 3 Nissan Rogues. But with that more granular lens, we can see that, as it turns out in this particular market, the ruby red had a market day supply of 59, while the gunmetal version, the gray, was a 93. And so going back to that comment I made earlier about that a 30-day difference in market day supply has an impact of 4x on your ability to turn. And so with margins being as compressed as they are, there is no doubt that having the fastest turning combinations in stock is really what's going to drive your ability to be successful. One of the other sort of hidden benefits to stocking the most attractive merchandise is it actually makes you a smarter and more effective digital marketer. We did a study just not too long ago where we found that vehicles that were in low market day supply, that had a market day supply below the model line average, were actually attracting 5 times more search activity and collecting 40% more VDP activity. And it kind of makes sense if you think about it, that most customers probably aren't out searching for the beiges or the browns. And so if we do a better job of really focusing our efforts on stocking those fast-turning color combinations is one of the key features that customers are searching for, and the right equipment, we actually are going to see a big noticeable uptick in the activity we're getting on those third-party listing sites where our inventory is merchandised. So our goal at vAuto that we talk to our clients about is to be targeting about a 70% target rate of what percentage of your inventory are those fast-turning combinations, and limiting those particular combinations to have less attention from online shoppers to something under 30%. So the next topic I want to talk about is this price to market rank. I'm sure many of you on the used car side of the business are familiar with price to market as a metric, but what we believe on the new car side is it really is relative to other dealers in your market, because new cars are basically a commodity where dealers across the market are essentially selling the same product. And so what I've seen over the past few years is sort of 3 key ways that dealers discount their vehicles, one of which is just to take MSRP less the rebate. Some dealers will advertise their entire inventory at invoice less rebate. Or one of the other common approaches I see is what we call the flatline dealer discounting, which would be to say I'm just going to discount $1,500 across my entire lineup of Hyundai Sonatas in this particular case. So we believe that dealers really need to incorporate more factors into their pricing decisions, and one of those important factors is to have more awareness to what the inventory situation is and let the inventory scenario drive some of those pricing decisions. And so let me show you how that could work. in this particular example, we're looking at a 2017 Ford Escape. And we can see here that the market day supply on Escape was 81 days. However, this particular dealer's day supply on Escape was much higher at 203 days. So he's got almost two-thirds of a year worth of inventory on his lot on 2017 Escapes. And when we drilled in deeper, what we found was that across the 3 trim levels of Escape, you can see that he really has no problem at all really on the SE or the S trim. He's actually performing much better than the overall market average. But on the titanium trim level, he is absolutely buried. And when we delve in a little bit closer and looked at how he was priced on those titaniums, we can see that in the market here of Nashville, he was ranked 6 out of 8 stores. And so I think when a dealer is sitting on a situation with a 441-day supply of a particular trim, I think those are certainly the vehicles that we want to be more aggressive and certainly have that awareness to what the other dealers in the market are doing in terms of price on their on that particular model trim combination. So we believe, if you have a scenario where the dealer day supply is high versus the market day supply, you certainly want to be in the top quartile of your competitive set. And if there's a scenario where you're basically on your dealer day supply is about average with the market, we believe you certainly want to be in the top half of dealers. And on those vehicles where your dealer day supply is much lower than the market day supply, that can sometimes be a warning to you that perhaps you're being unnecessarily aggressive in your discounting, and perhaps there is some margin that you could take on particular models. One of the big keys to being successful in today's transparent market is being transparent. That's what customers are desperate for as they're doing their online shopping. And here's just a great example of a dealer that is providing sort of the why behind his pricing. And one great easy way to do that is with a third-party endorsement, whether that be from Kelley Blue Book or any of the third parties out there, to substantiate that the price that dealer is providing online is in fact a fair and reasonable price relative to the market. And I think as the industry continues to move more towards a digital retailing model where more and more of the shopping will take place online, and perhaps in the future customers will just be buying their cars completely online, this necessity to be more clear and transparent on pricing is going to become increasingly important for new car operators. So the last topic I want to talk about is VDP engagement. And some of the traditional things that we've used to evaluating our digital marketing success was sort of the VDP to SRP conversion. How much website traffic is my dealership website getting? How many leads did I get? And or perhaps how many chat sessions? But we believe that dealers really need to take a closer look at how they're monitoring their digital marketing success. And I'll talk a little bit more about this VDP engagement. But it is interesting to point out that last year, about 35% of the dealers' ad spend across America was on digital, yet 80% of customers' time spent shopping for cars was done online. So I think it's going to become increasingly important for dealers to migrate more and more towards a digital marketing mix that's more closely representative of where customers are spending their time. And as they do that, it's this VDP engagement that's going to provide a really good barometer to how successful you're being. So what does that mean? What does VDP engagement mean? That means that building your landing pages for each vehicle with multiple opportunities for the customer to engage more deeply with that listing. And so things like request a test drive, request a quote, get financing information. In this particular BMW example, the dealer's got 8 different opportunities here for the customer to engage more fully with this listing. And so I would ask you to go back and look at your listings and how much activity are you getting on the listings that are on your website of the inventory that you have, because that is going to provide a much better indicator for you to your digital marketing effectiveness than the sheer number of VDPs. One of our partners did a study recently, and they found that once a vehicle has 3.6 engagements, those are vehicles that are typically getting ready to move off your lot. And so I think oftentimes when we, make dealer trades or other decisions about pricing, oftentimes we'll look to see, hey, does this car have any leads on it? Have we had any activity on this vehicle? I believe that, it might be worthwhile to take a look to see how much engagement is that particular listing getting. And that can provide both a positive and a negative indicator for you. If we have a scenario with a car that's been on your website for 220 days with 0 engagements, that's a vehicle where the internet is screaming at you that that vehicle needs more attention. Meanwhile, if we have a vehicle with 4 or 5 or 6 engagements, that's certainly a vehicle that I wouldn't be looking to make any additional price concessions on in the near future because it's likely getting ready to sell. So what does this all add up to is new vehicle inventory turn. And as I mentioned in the opening comments, really believe this is just perhaps the most important metric that dealers should be paying closer attention to for managing the overall health of their new car inventory. And why it's so important is, as I said at the beginning, with gross margins being razor thin, it's our ability to turn what we call the wheel of fortune faster, which is going to drive sustainable profitability moving forward. And by turning the wheel of fortune faster, what we mean is new car business, although the margins are tough, is sort of the initial domino that puts into motion all of these other revenue streams for our dealership operation, which is I get more quality trade-in vehicles. I'm able to create more units in operation for future parts and service business, which is at a much higher margin. I'm going to have a better shot of collecting on those factory bonus dollars. I'm going to make more profitability on floor plan. And not last but not least, most dealers are running in the $1,200 to $1,300 range in F&I, which also provides a much better margin opportunity for our business. So really this new car sale, although on the front end gross has become so tough, it really is the lifeblood that feeds all of these other departments within our dealership that can provide much more profitability than new car sales themselves. So just a couple closing thoughts. As I mentioned, Bill Belichick in my opener, I'm sort of fascinated with how this guy has sustained such remarkable success. I looked up, he's won 15 of the last 17 division championships, 8 Super Bowl appearances, and 5 Super Bowl rings. I'm sure he's going to go down as one of the great coaches of all time, and I think there's some lessons we can take from him. And what he said here was to live in the past is to die in the present. And I guess I would ask you to think about many of the metrics that we've used to evaluate our success in new cars perhaps are not the most relevant in today's increasingly transparent and competitive market. So I'd ask you, as you go back and think about your business for 2018, to give some consideration to those metrics that I talked about. What percentage of my inventory is fast turning? Of that $6 million investment I have in my new car inventory, what percentage of that is moving quickly, and what am I doing about that dead stock that's tied up capital? And then the second one that I talked about was that price to market rank. What is my relative position in the market? And if I've got a high market day supply combination that I'm swimming in, am I priced 7th out of 8 dealers, or am I priced 2nd out of 8? I think that's another important thing that you should be evaluating in your business, because if you're not evaluating it, I can promise you that your online shoppers are certainly looking at that. And then, as I talked about, the importance of being more granular and looking at not just the count of vehicle display activity, but how much engagement are each of those listings on your website getting. And I think those metrics are going to all help drive your business and hopefully drive a much higher new car inventory turn for the future to drive your profitability across your business. So with that, I think, the road is in front of us for 2018, and there's a lot of reasons to be very optimistic. The economy is still very strong. The new car market, although is not as red hot as it was perhaps in 2015 or 2016, I think we're going to more or less maintain a very, very healthy new car market that's going to provide plenty of opportunity for dealers that are managing their business in a more granular fashion. So with that, Karen, I believe I'll turn it back over to you for any questions or comments at all from the audience.
Well, thank you, Brian, especially for that great information. Now we'll turn to the audience for their questions. The first, can you please tell us what VDP stands for again?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's two key digital marketing acronyms, and I should have spelled it out, but VDP stands for Vehicle Display Page. And so any of your listings on your dealership website, once the customer drills into an actual vehicle, that is a VDP view. And one of the other important metrics is what's called an SRP, a search results page, which is particularly important on your third-party websites like AutoTrader, Cars.com, or CarGurus, where your customers are going looking for particular inventory. And so the number of vehicles that are returned in that SRP, in the case of AutoTrader, they provide 25 listings for each search results page. And then once a customer clicks on one of those particular vehicles, triggers the VDP, the Vehicle Display Page. So that's a good question.
Thank you, Brian. Next question is right along those lines. We have multiple new vehicles online that are the exact same color, trim, price, etc. Should we only show one of each unique vehicle on our site to get more VDPs on a single VIN?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's an issue, quite frankly, on third-party listing sites. Is a lot of the new car business, there's, as I said, sort of a commoditization issue where it's not uncommon for a dealer to perhaps have 5 silver Camry LEs that are all identical vehicles with identical MSRPs. And so what ends up happening on the situation on your third-party sites is perhaps only one of those vehicles is going to get the bulk of that shopping activity, probably the first one listed, and the other 4 Camrys are probably not going to get anywhere near as much activity. So we at Cox Automotive are actually looking at that exact issue to figure out a better way to handle that particular problem that you raised. I would say within your dealership website, it certainly doesn't hurt to promote the fact that you've got plenty in stock. And I wouldn't be so concerned about the sheer number of VDPs on each of those Camry listings if you were a Toyota dealer. But what would be of most concern to me is, am I getting activity, engagement on those VDPs? Are customers engaging with me, request a chat, request a quote, submitting a lead off of those VDP pages? I think that is a much more important indicator as to whether or not you're capturing customers' attention, a real buyer attention, I should say.
Okay, thank you. Are there any particular VDP engagements that have the greater probability of conversion?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is this vehicle still available in inventory is a big one. Request a quote is a big one. Those are 2 that come to mind that are at the top of the list for having, a higher propensity to a customer that's looking to buy.
Okay, thank you. How are selling prices garnered from the competitive retailers?
So there's a number of ways that you can go about doing this. Some dealers do it manually, where they'll have their internet manager go out and actually look at all of the competitive listings in their market. Some dealers I've heard have even done mystery shopping, where they will have folks in their internet department call to get that competitive pricing data. Or you can use solutions like our vAuto Conquest platform that allows you to do that very easily, where we're every day monitoring the activity in your market of how your competition is pricing their cars and providing that to you in a very simple application. So it's very easy to keep track of what the competitive market is doing. And I just think it's a really important point, because in that example I shared in the presentation where the dealer had the 441-day supply of titaniums, he probably recognized that he was swimming in titaniums. I don't know that he recognized that he was, I think, priced 6th or 7th out of 8 dealers in the market. So having that more granular visibility to my inventory situation relative to my competitive pricing, I think is a real important thing for dealers to keep a close eye on.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. Do the new metrics that we've been talking about work for Highline dealers?
Yeah, so one of the challenges with Highline is oftentimes brands like Mercedes, Lexus, and I think even BMW will restrict dealers' ability to advertise below invoice. So that really sort of takes out of the equation. Price becomes less of a differentiator in the market. However, you know, if many of your competitors are pricing at full sticker and you choose to price something less than that, I think will certainly help attract customers to your listings. So, but to answer that question more specifically about the impact on these metrics on Highline dealers, I think when you consider the fact that often price is less of a differentiator, the way that I can win more customers is by having the healthiest inventory and by understanding which of those combinations and perhaps my BMW 3 Series inventory are the fastest turning combinations that are going to help me hit my factory bonus targets and help me move my inventory faster. You know, one other thing I want to touch on with respect to the health of your overall inventory is there's a really interesting trend going on in the marketplace today, which is this vast migration from sedans to SUVs and crossovers. And so what we saw was about 5 years ago, about 50% of the market was sedans and about 50% of the market was made up of truck and SUV. And as of last month, that ratio has now switched to 65% truck SUV. So I think it's important that dealers keep a close eye on those particular model lines in the crossover segment or in the pickup truck segment. You know, like a Toyota Tacoma right now, for example, is one of the hottest new vehicles out there. And by paying closer attention to that new vehicle inventory turn on each of those Tacomas is going to help you earn more Tacomas because the factories across the board reward dealers that turn and earn the quickest. And so I think that's one important thing to keep a close eye on in 2018 is on those hot model lines like Honda Pilot, Toyota Tacoma, so many of the Subaru vehicles, turn is just critically important to providing you with more opportunities to order that hot production that your customers are hungry for.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. We continue to hear about eroding dealership new car profits and billion-dollar manufacturers' profits. Do you see any correlation between the two?
A great question. I think this is something that some brands are having a much bigger problem with than others. But, you know, I take, for example, I guess I'll call out a couple of brands that I think do a fantastic job of really placing their dealers first. And in fact, NADA just released their annual dealer satisfaction survey a week ago, and the top 3 brands were Toyota, Lexus, and Honda. And I think those brands, by and large, those dealers' return on sales performance is much higher than the national average, and they're manufacturers that really take the voice and the overall health, the financial health of their dealer body very, very seriously. So I think those are a couple that, you know, deserve recognition as being brands that do a fantastic job of working in collaboration with their dealer partners. Obviously, you know, other brands are more challenged, specifically brands that, you know, have a scenario where they're overproducing relative to what the market demand is. Those brands tend to place more pressure on their dealers, and that often leads to compressed margins as well. So, you know, I think there's a reason why operators and big dealer groups are willing to pay really healthy multiples to get a Lexus store. I think part of that is the fact that Lexus dealers on average just make a lot more money, and that's just an example of a brand that sticks out in my mind that does a fantastic job of working with their dealer partners.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. Do you have any ideas of how to work with my OEM when they're forcing inventory that ends up sitting with little interest?
This is a real common problem, an age-old dilemma in the car business is how do I, you know, be a factory friend and take that wholesale even when it's not in the best interest of my business. And I guess I think back to my days of making those phone calls myself. Many of those decisions are sort of made more or less as a personal favor to your factory rep. And I guess what I would encourage you to do is take a moment to take a little closer look at that list of vehicles they have available so you can cherry pick those particular combinations that have the highest likelihood to sell and do your best to avoid those combinations that are oversupplied and slow turners. And I realize that's not always possible, but my experience over the years has been that dealers are probably not spending the appropriate time on those decisions they should. And when you think about the enormous amount of money tied up in new vehicle inventories, certainly begs the question why we're not spending more time looking at that than the average dealer told us 2 hours per month.
Thank you. Next question. Do you find that people engage with the chat feature, and do you find the closing rate to be higher?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have any specific stats related to chat. I do know that I have seen some things that have indicated that is certainly an engagement mechanism that customers are increasingly looking to use, more so than email. I believe that the number of email leads has actually across the industry come down quite a bit over the last 10 years as customers are increasingly going to texting as well as just chat while they're online. But as to what metrics you should be shooting for, the propensity of those customers to buy, I don't have that off the top of my head. I'm sure we can look that up.
All right. Thank you. Next question. The title of this webinar is New Metrics for the Success of the New Vehicle Department. How does advocating speeding up the race to invoice help us?
Yeah, I don't believe that I'm suggesting that everybody should cut their prices to invoice. I think what I'm suggesting is that by having a more clear visibility to each of the vehicles in stock is going to give me a better indication of which cars I have an opportunity to hold gross on and which cars I need to be more aggressive on. And so I'll give you a case in point. I recently met with a Ford dealer that had a particular combination as inventory that was only a 27 market day supply, and he was priced $1,300 lower than the next closest competitor. So in that particular example, we've got a vehicle that's a fast turning piece of merchandise that's clearly in demand in the market. He, in fact, was the only dealer that had that particular color trim combination, yet he was priced $1,300 less than the next closest dealer. So I think the knife cuts both ways. And what I'm suggesting is that dealers should take more time to look for those opportunities where they don't necessarily have to give away the farm on every single car and find those opportunities where perhaps you can make a little more money, but also be aware and cognizant of those particular combinations where the market is just flooded. And I would say, it's unfortunately we're in a kind of a commoditized business where we have no choice but to be competitively priced. And if you're priced in the bottom half of the dealers in your market on a vehicle with its 441 market day supply, the harsh reality is I think it's going to be a while before customers pay you a visit to your online showroom.
Thank you. Next question. What source do you recommend for actual transaction data? For example, J.D. Power's PIN or possibly TrueCar's data? Any others?
Yeah, I think both of those are good. J.D. Power PIN, last I understood, they collect about 25 to 30% of the actual transactions. Kelley Blue Book is up in the close to 50 and the high 40s, I believe. And I'm not sure what TrueCar has in terms of percentage of overall transactions, but certainly all three of those are pretty good indicators as to what a reasonable gross expectation is on the various model lines you're selling.
Thank you very much. Next question. Can you compare or contrast some of the largest third-party online marketing platforms for dealers?
I don't know that I can provide a great answer to that. I can say, and this is a little bit of a Cox Automotive speak, I know that the team at AutoTrader is making a number of enhancements to the AutoTrader platform here in 2018 to make it more shopper-friendly. I think that increasingly what we're seeing across the market is that those third-party shopping sites are still attracting anywhere from 15 to 18 million shoppers a month. So it's clearly a place where there's activity is taking place and shopping is taking place. But there's a number of players out in the market now that are becoming much more targeted in identifying in-market shoppers that have expressed a propensity to buy in a particular model and figuring out ways that you can communicate directly with those in-market shoppers. Certainly strikes me as something that is interesting that dealers should be paying close attention to as they think about becoming more efficient with that $645 they're spending on average to attract customers to buy cars at their store.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. What do you consider to be a realistic new car inventory turn target?
Well, that certainly varies across the different brands. So a brand like Subaru, I think last I looked, the average inventory turn was 9 or 10 times nationally, which is basically to say they're carrying about a 35, 40-day supply of cars, which is really, really impressive. But I would say that the average for your mass market brands, Chevrolet, Ford, Chrysler, et cetera, is closer to 3.5. So if you're performing at an inventory turn rate better than 3.5, you're doing a pretty good job. If you're something less than 3.5, I think you need to take a closer look at what inventory you're stocking, how you're pricing, and your online merchandising activities.
Thank you. How should I handle pricing when my manufacturer has pricing restrictions?
Yeah, that's we talked about that a little bit with the luxury players, and I think the best bet is to, as I said, be aware of the market, of each particular piece of inventory and their relative position in the market, and do your best to be aggressive where you need to and hold gross where those opportunities present themselves.
Thank you, Brian. Next question. I am at a Honda store. Honda advertising guidelines prohibit us from listing our pricing online if it is under invoice. How would I know how everyone else is pricing their Hondas if we cannot see the listed price?
Well, I mean, I know firsthand that our vAuto application is able to provide that information so that you can see exactly how all of your competitive dealers are advertising their cars in the market. Some dealers will, in fact, and brands like Honda use it as to ensure that their competition is following those guidelines to almost police their competitive dealers. So that's one, way top of mind that comes to me as a tactic or an application, I guess I should say, that can help you collect that information.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I believe we've come to the end of our questions, and that brings us to the end of our webinar. So thank you, audience, for the questions that you did ask, and if you asked one that we didn't get a chance to answer, vAuto will follow up by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour. You'll find it at autonews.com/powertraining. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. Your feedback helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial for you. So thanks again to Brian and vAuto for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great day.